Good morning, everybody. It's Saturday morning, and quick apology for being late in getting this out to you, but we'll get it here before noon on Saturday, I believe. I just wanted to do a quick overview of really what we talked about last Sunday evening when we got together for our community Lord's meal and talked about the launch of our network of small gatherings, and that's the way to think about it. Small gatherings, simple gatherings, house churches, we're talking about them in the same way. Those are all synonymous terms with one another. So wanted to go back over some of the things we talked about in a summary and a simplified way, and really just give you details as everybody begins to meet in those simple gatherings over this weekend. And you have a communication system in place with Facebook Messenger for those of you that are connected that way, gathering information and sharing that with one another to be able to do texting with one another. Email as well will continue to work, and each house church will have its own email connection that is able to happen through constant contact updates. So your gathering leaders will be able to communicate you to directly through that means as well, or on a regular basis, as well as just the general communications among our network of gatherings. We will be meeting on Sunday morning, tomorrow at 10 a.m. for what will now become a network learning time. And I'll talk about that a little bit further in the video because I gave you some summary ideas of that yesterday as well. So that will be in person, all together in the auditorium at 10 a.m. as well as on Zoom. And the Zoom will likely be one way, so there won't be the back and forth that we're used to just because of the way that we're set up. So that'll be recorded. And if you're not able to come on Sunday morning at 10 a.m., you'll be able to watch the video of that over the course of the afternoon on Sunday, hopefully even prior to gathering as simple gatherings, just for those of you that are gathering on Sunday afternoon or evening. Most often Sunday mornings will be looking ahead to the following weekend. So you'll have a sort of something to begin to think about and to be working on for the following weekend. That way we're just ahead of it because some of our gatherings will be on Saturday night. So they'll be working from the previous week's Sunday morning network teaching. So we'll get used to all this, but it's exciting to be going in this way. It's always a challenge to make change things for change, but it's something we understand very strongly philosophically, as well as I think practically, because we've met this way in a variety of times, especially when you look back to our monthly home church meetings. You're all used to gathering in that way. We're just doing that more often and more frequently, and I know that exciting things are ahead in terms of, for us who are part of the Grace Church families, but for others, it's going to open up a lot of doors of opportunity, and it's going to tie a lot of things together that we've talked about over the years. So the Lord give you grace and blessing as we engage in this together, and really put love at the heart of what we're doing in every way, and as we go about this. So let's talk about it. Let me move to my slides here and just give you a quick summary of things. So again, what we're capping off here, and what I capped off on Sunday, was the idea of, okay, we've talked about the first century churches, we've understood them, we've maybe haven't understood it entirely in detail, but we've got enough to envision what this might look like today. And that was our whole purpose over the last 7 weeks, was to envision what it would be to obey Jesus's plan for the church as we see it unfolding in the New Testament. There'll be a link in the description below for the Francis Chan video that I suggested to you all too. And the premise of that video is what I was interested in. If you just had no history or no idea of what the church was, no tradition, you didn't know anything about what it means to be or do church, and all you had was the New Testament, and you were looking at it and studying it and reading it in terms of what you see in Acts and what you see in Paul's letters and the contributions that the other apostles make, and how Jesus even makes a reference to it in the book of Matthew 2 times, what would you conclude that the church is and should be? And that's where he's going in that video, and that's where we've been going in understanding that. But understanding that we need to deconstruct and take apart some of our conceptions about what church is and what church does, and those traditions that have come to us over the years, trying to go back to the way of the first century church, because that's where Jesus's pattern is. And then working together and remaining committed together and sacrificially moving ahead together to see that we follow Jesus in this way. And Jesus is the middle of all this. Jesus and the love he has for us and the love he's prayed for and commanded that we have for one another is at the heart of what we're doing. And that informs everything, the way we meet and what we do. And I think you'll discover that and experience that together as we move forward. Again, to summarize, the idea that we talked about in this last encyclical, the churches of the first century, the circular letter among the global BILD network that we've been studying and how it applies to us, there's a connection or a link between the spontaneous expansion of the early church. In other words, how the early church grew, how Christianity grew and multiplied in an unplanned but a solid way. And the simple gathering together of communities of believers on the first day of every week in homes or tenements, apartment buildings in Roman times, around an evening meal celebrating the new life in Christ. What you do in the smallest unit has an impact on the growth and the multiplication of the whole. That's the idea. So if we get the small unit wrong, we affect the whole, the mission of Jesus in the world. Those two things are tied together, and we don't often think of that. And we have lost that sense that it's clearly there in the book of Acts in the plan that Jesus put together. This is what Jesus intended to do, and we were only just now rediscovering it after so many years, but even in terms of understanding the science of networks and connections and things like that. So not that we're the first to do this or to discover this. There have been fits and starts over the centuries with churches, but there's something about going back to and constantly reflecting on the way of Christ and the apostles, the plan of Jesus and the pattern of Jesus, the design of Jesus for his churches, and how everything works within that big picture. This is the big picture. So again, just to break it down into what's going on here, the idea is in the city, you would have a network of simple gatherings, as little as 2 or 3 people in one location, or 10 to 15, or if you had a larger home, 25 to 40, or a very wealthy person who could host a lot of people, might even have a courtyard that hosted 50 to 70. And you had a network of these, each of them having believers in them who are getting established, new non-believers who are being invited in and visiting, friends, family, neighbors, co-workers, and then leaders in each one of these, overseeing those churches, giving guidance to them, connected, meeting together with a team of leaders that are moving around among them and even moving from city to city. That's Paul and his team. That's this complex apostolic network that you see down here. And when we talk about this sodality, modality idea, very, very important. Modality leaders, they have a local focus. They're focused in on one of these blue dots you see on the left. That's a modality leader. They're shepherding and overseeing that group, and doing that with the help of deacons who are helping in that simple gathering, or might be moving and helping across others. They're connected together. So what connects these, the key aspect of the connection of these simple gatherings, is the leaders in them. And then the times and opportunities when everybody can get together. But in the early church, that was probably rare, if it ever even occurred, just because of the nature of the times. We have opportunities today through Zoom and through a space that is dedicated to that, to come back together and to see everybody and be in one place like we were last Sunday night. So we have opportunities to do both. But the heart of their existence were these simple gatherings where they celebrated their life in Christ every week around a family meal and had a family discussion and learning and worship and prayer and singing and sharing and all sorts of things going on, and as well as even sending help to others through this network of churches. So then you have the sodality leaders, which are Paul and his team, Titus and Timothy, and some of those people, Priscilla and Aquila and Epaphroditus, and all of these. Paul has a team of about 90 people that are moving around among these clusters of churches, city to city, or even within a city, a network of city. Those two types of leaders, the local overseeing leaders in each one of the simple gatherings, and the apostolic leaders or the sodality leaders, like Paul and his team that are moving around. Timothy, you need to go over here. We need to send someone over here. Apollos, you're needed there. That combination is what made spontaneous expansion happen. But it started at the simple gathering, but through this apostolic team and their communication, through visits, through letters, it's the stuff that made the New Testament, is this activity between these two kinds of leaders that caused that network of churches to grow and expand in the first century. So very, very important. This is the mechanism. This is the design that Jesus had for his church. And that's why it's important for us not only to understand it, make sure that we have both of these kinds of leaders, but make sure that we're gathering and networking in this kind of way. And it's what we need to be doing everywhere in the world. Jesus prayed for one church, one mission, and rooted in the first principles, leaders of this type and this kind, what the gospel is, what the lifestyle of the gospel is, after the gospel is. These are all the ideas come together in the concrete reality of the first century. Here's the problem today that we have. We tend to think about Christianity as one church, one pastor, or one church, one leader, and that's it. That's all that Jesus had planned and intended. And as long as we have a bunch of those, everything is okay. That is not a network of churches and teams of leaders. This does not produce the model that we see and the design that we see Jesus having for his early church. The one pastor, one church, one building, all that stuff happened there, and it might get as big as, some can grow it really, really big, and others choose to remain small. But that's it. That's all we should expect and all we should go for. That's the vision we ought to have. That is not, but that is unfortunately the way Christianity is thought of today, and many believers and leaders think about it that way, and just multiplying a bunch of those unconnected. We have 45,000 denominations in the world today among Christianity, many of them represented here in the United States. Jesus prayed for one church. We've created 45,000 different kinds of churches. That's a problem. And a lot of it comes down to this idea, among many, many other things. No, Jesus intended, and the plan that we see in Acts is a network of churches, teams of leaders moving among those churches and working among those churches and connected in those churches. That is how we get back to what Jesus has designed for his churches and the fruitfulness and effectiveness that it had. And we're taking that step to get back to this idea of a network of churches. And again, you have to change your mind about what you think about as a church. If you think about it as one pastor, one building, one meeting, or a central meeting on a Sunday morning, all of those things, when we define church that way, we're stuck. If we think about church as a simple gathering in this way that we've begun to study over the last few weeks, and that we will continue to study in a new encyclical that I brought back with me from the Global BILD Conference last week. We'll be studying that as we do it in the weeks ahead, and I think you're gonna see how all of these things come together in very, very specific ways. But if we were to take that earlier map and say, okay, well, what does it look like for us to do this? Well, we have on the left Grace Church, a growing network of simple gatherings. Imagine in the city of Clifton and other places where we are, but the city of Clifton in particular, we have a network of those simple gatherings of a variety of kinds of people, depending on the homes available and on the number of leaders that we have, and it's constantly multiplying. And in our situation, some of them are Ukrainian speaking, or Polish speaking, or Albanian speaking, or Turkish speaking, or Arabic speaking, or Korean speaking, and many of them are English speaking, obviously. And you have people of all kinds of ages and groups. You don't have one kind of person in all of them. They're families, and it looks like a family gathering, each one of them around a meal and a significant time of discussion, learning, and relationship and sharing with one another. That becomes the life of who we are, and that's constantly growing. And new ones are in different neighborhoods are always growing together. Just imagine, amongst a city of 80,000 people, how many of these we need, and how many other churches like we have been as Grace Church and following that older tradition need to be reshaped in this way. And then how many problems and how many people can be reached. What you do is you increase the surface area of the church out into the world, out in neighborhoods and out in workplaces and out in what we might call third spaces, like a Starbucks or a semi-public location where the people can interact with the gospel and the people whose lives are being shaped by the gospel. That gets the work done, more so than the one church, one pastor model that we were talking about before. And then here we've been talking about the 3-city initiative of in Clifton, Passaic, and Patterson. Imagine a cluster like that we have on the left, starting in Clifton, but also one in Patterson and also one in Passaic, and all the different kinds of people that could reach and all the kinds of people that would be involved in that, all learning the same first principles of Christ, leaders being trained within them, all the different people groups, languages that would be represented there, and some of them going back or sending, bringing the gospel back to their home countries. When we pull all these connections together and begin to integrate all this stuff that's in bits and pieces all over the place, a lot of stuff begins to happen spontaneously, unplanned. The Spirit opens this door. A relationship is made over there. There are all sorts of things, but we also, again, need these kinds of leaders in each one of these simple gatherings, but a team of leaders that are working together to oversee and to develop a network like that. And that's the work that I've been doing. That's been my primary task here at Grace Church for a number of years, is to be this type of sodality leader, a global leader who is participating with local leaders, but working to see networks develop in other areas. Training that we're doing in Patterson through the Star of Hope Network, the work I do in Albania and Kosovo, that we're partnered together, and the ability to move around in those places. The work that we're going to be doing in Indiana is an extension of what you're doing here. We've learned, this has been our learning time for what we're fully equipped and prepared to do now, we feel, as a family. And that will be a family of families that's connected with you guys because of our work. And the fact that here's why I will be coming back and forth at least 4 times a year, if not more, and to continue to work with the leadership team here. The one church, one pastor model, when that pastor leaves, another one comes in, everything changes, because it's all about that church and it's really about nothing else. When we think missional, when we think network, you see why Paul moved back and forth, why he was here for a while, or why that person went there, and those relationships were maintained. And I've been modeling that for a number of years in my work back and forth with Albania, because we didn't go there to plant one church and leave and turn it over to somebody. We went there to build a network, and a network that will expand in other parts of the world where there are Albanians. Pray for our 2 Albanian families that are there in Indiana that we know, and God's blessing on them and our connections with them, even in the next week as we move out there. So what will our simple gatherings look like? What's actually going to happen? Well, like I said, this isn't new to us. We're familiar with it. Those of you who've been part of our home churches and even in our Lord's community, Lord's meals, know what this looks like in general. But it's good to just have everybody on the same page with this. Again, it has 2 parts: a meal and a gathering after the meal, or a discussion and a time of many, many things, a family time after the meal. But the first is the meal. The meal was at the heart of these small, simple meetings that fed the spontaneous expansion of the early church. You see it in Acts 2:42 with the fellowship and breaking bread from house to house. In Acts 20, it's talked about when we gathered on the first night of the week to break bread. That was what the whole meal was described as. Paul fully developed this Lord's Supper idea in 1 Corinthians 11, and that meant the same thing as when the believers gathered together to break bread. They got together to observe the Lord's Supper, and that meal was so central that it's the way they called the whole meeting together. When we got together at the end of the first day of the week to break bread, Acts 27. So this is a very, very important idea around the meal. It's not an added extra, and it's not something that is non-sacred. We've got to get away from the whole idea of sacred and non-sacred. It's sacred when we gather in a room and we have an altar and music and all these kinds of things. A building is not a sacred space. The people of God are a sacred space wherever they gather together. That and how they gather together demonstrates that sacredness when they put Jesus at the center of who they are and their identity as a family. That's what the meal does. And then the discussion that comes around that. So a meal is a very, very important part. So we'll be meeting in homes across Clifton and the area. Some of us are not in Clifton, but many of us are. We have some homes that have said we'll be a primary hosting home, and we'll work on how to do that together. And each of the simple gatherings will have to work out the particulars. And some people come in early to help and staying late to clean up. It's not going to be a whole burden on any family. It's going to be things that we share together. We might use semi-public places on occasion. We still can use our facility for those meetings, but how we meet is what's important. It'll still be around a meal, and it'll still be in this format. It just may be in another location, especially with COVID going around. We'll have to remain mindful of that, but it's not going to change our pattern of meeting. We can't have COVID dictate what the church is designed to be. We have to let Jesus do that. So we'll adopt and we'll adapt, but we're not going to let that dictate how we do things. We're just going to be wise about it, but faithful to Jesus's design. The gathering will be about 2 to 3 hours in length. So you need to plan. Again, think about what we have typically done on a Sunday morning. We get in there at 10, we leave about 12:30 or 1 back in the day prior to COVID. So the 3-hour time we've normally done on a Sunday morning, we're just going to be doing that at a different time of the day. And I know one of the challenges is, well, our culture is sort of set aside. Sunday morning is when you do church, and everything is oriented around it. Well, that's the problem. Again, that's not Jesus's design for things. It's intended to be a meal. The meal is important, so you eat at a time when meals are normal, in the early afternoon or in the evening in particular. So there's some flexibility on those things. But the churches will determine the particulars. But again, you want to think about 2.5 to 3 hours of time that's set aside each week, that you're driven by love and committed to making yourself available to others, and your contributions of food and spiritual things as well. Again, our pattern is in Acts 2:42, in 1 Corinthians 11:17 to 14:40. This is what the simple node or the simple gathering looked like. That's what we have there in 1 Corinthians especially, but generally described in Acts 2:42. And we'll be talking more specifically about the 1 Corinthians pattern in this new study that will begin, that I will introduce tomorrow morning during our network teaching time. And everybody participates. This is not a spectator sport. This is not a show that we watch. It's not a theater that we come to and pay for by putting offering in the play. This is something that we are all actively involved in, where believers get together and encourage and strengthen and learn from one another and build relationships, and where non-believing friends encounter the gospel. We become the gospel in the way that we meet and gather together and what we do together. And then the words that we say and the things that we share about Jesus are strengthened by that. They just help people. They explain to people who we are and what we're doing. And so you'll have a tremendous opportunity to speak to your friends and neighbors about what it means to be a follower of Jesus and what that looks like, and even introduce them to it at an appropriate time in an appropriate way. For those of you who've done First Principles, look at book 3 on participating in the mission of the church. Look at session 3, session 4, session 5 of that booklet, and you will see how that plugs right into this way of gathering together and how that works. Very different in the system that we become used to, one church, one pastor, Sunday morning worship service. Leaders will learn and grow together for everyone's help. To have a number of simple gatherings, we need a lot of leaders. If you only got one church, one pastor, you only need one pastor. If it's a big church, you might need a pastoral staff. But when you've got 20 house churches in the city, you need 20 leaders, and you're constantly looking for more of them. And we have the way to train those leaders with our resources in First Principles and BILD's leadership series, as well as just our experience together. And we need to have different kinds of leaders. We need to have those overseeing leaders and those working, serving leaders like deacons and leading women. But we also need these apostolic leaders, these sodality types who move around among the churches and are always watching to see how the network can grow and solving problems in them and training up the other leaders around them. This is how Christ has designed it to work. And this is how the church will be strengthened, and we'll see the work grow and multiply. So just some things, again, practically. What will you be doing for these meetings? Well, getting ready, preparing at home. Some of you might go early to help the host family, the home that we're meeting in or the location we're meeting in, to help get things set up. You come together, let's say you're meeting from a 5 to 7:30, 8 o'clock time. You get together at 5, you start gathering, mingling, talking, catching up, asking questions, just, small talk and getting together. Come together around a psalm, a prayer of thanks, and a simple explanation of the bread that we're using to start the meal. This is what the overseeing leaders or perhaps the host family is going to be doing. And then you're having the meal together, your table talk, you're asking questions, you're telling the stories of the week, just normal stuff, finding out more about one another's lives, asking questions, tell me about how did you guys meet together? And how did you tell me about, what brought you to become married? Or there's all kinds of things to talk about. Talk to the kids about what's going on in school, engage everybody. That's what we do around the meal. And then when the meal is over and everybody seems to finish, we stop and we have the cup. Explain what that means, and we give thanks and we share it for it. And that's Jesus's body to start the meal, connected with the meal, and then ending the meal with the remembrance of his shed blood. They go together. The bread and the cup are not to be removed from the meal. They don't stand on their own. They're the bookends of the meal. When we start, when we finish, and then move into a time of discussion. And so we would, after finishing the meal and having the cup at the end, we'd move to a more formal time. And it might even be in another room. You might be eating over here and meeting over there. But it's in a comfortable, informal kind of living room, family sitting room environment. It's not in rows with somebody standing up front. It's in a family way. The kids will stay with us and participate as well. We want to try to keep the kids engaged. For the little ones, have a coloring pages or have a book or have something for them to do on the floor. But we want to try to keep the kids engaged and keep everything at the level that everybody can share with it. There'll be songs, there'll be teaching, there'll be insights, there'll be testimonies, praises and thanks. And this will all be led and directed by the leaders there. So it has order to it, but everybody's free to participate and contribute to the life of one another. We'll be talking more about that in the studies during the weeks to come. There'll be a discussion of the teaching that week, what we've learned or talked about in either the video or the network teaching time on Sunday morning, again, from the previous week. There would be some reading to do, some discussion questions. The gathering time will be as rich as your preparation for it will be. If you walk in there having done nothing, you will be contributing nothing. Just as if you showed up without any food, there will be no food to share. Spiritual things will come out of what you've cultivated in your life, as small as it might be, and plan to bring. So be thinking ahead. What am I? Lord, help me to understand and discover what I will be bringing to the meeting, to the gathering next week when we get together. What would that be? Help me be alert to it. Help me see it. Take notes about it. Record that video link or whatever that I've learned, and be prepared to bring that. It'll come then to a close by prayer, or many as the time allowed. You have a time of prayer together. Again, the management of the time is going to be something that the leaders are going to be mindful of, and it's going to be clunky and awkward at first. That's okay. We'll get better with time, and that'll be working together. And then you're cleaning up and going home. This is at 2.5 hours after you started, or 3 at the most. Cleaning up, going home, greeting each other, making plans for connection to it. Hey, can I call you? Can we have coffee together? Can we meet for prayer? Could be all of those things. So it's not just a Sunday to Sunday thing, but there will be other opportunities where we can encourage those for you ladies to get together with one another during the week. For men, you to sit down and have a cup of coffee, or just talk on the phone. Any kinds of things to make connections among yourselves is great to have. Again, this time after the meal, you've had the meal, starting with the bread, ending with the cup, moving into this teaching time. There's a formal time of discussion overseen by leaders. Everybody contributes. Could be artistic, song, poetry, written prayer, visual art. Hey, one of the kids did a drawing of Noah and the Ark. Let's pull that out, parents, and show it to everybody. Have the kids explain what they did. Put those things out there to encourage others. It could be teaching, sharing a piece of biblical teachings learned and applied in one's life. It could be something you've done in First Principles. It could be something you've done in our previous studies, or something that you're learning on your own. But there'll be opportunities to do that. Sharing new understanding or insights as the Spirit works in the minds of established believers to uncover the truth based on the mind of Christ. We all have the mind of Christ. We have the Spirit of Christ. And here's how we can learn from one another and teach one another. Not in a prideful way or an arrogant way, but all of us have the same Spirit, and that Spirit wants to build the body and build the church. So when the Spirit is filling your life and the Word is dwelling richly within you, you will be a building feature, a building block for others in the church. It may be a presentation of a problem. Individuals may present a problem to the group that seeks to understand biblical principles and how they apply to the issue. Remember the little study we did on Robert Banks and the discussion they had in the Roman church that we studied really about, the slave was going to be set free, but he wasn't sure what to do. Should he continue to remain a slave? Would his freedom be better to have? They had a good discussion around it. That's the kind of a thing. Hey, I encountered this at work and I don't know what to do about it. Anybody have any insight to offer? Can we pray about it? Things like that. During that time too, you'll be getting communication from the larger team, the network team. And if there's things that need to be, schedule things or teaching that needs to be delivered to everybody in the churches, the leaders will be bringing that. Our leadership team will be meeting every week. And right now we meet every week on Friday. The goal is to talk about how things are going and what issues need to be addressed. And so there's a regular place where those things are being communicated. And that's very important that we have a good communication. So pray for the leadership team. The leadership, not just one pastor, one church, but the whole team now has become very, very important as we move to this network of simple gatherings. And leadership may go to pack the passages and main thrust. If something is coming up that is challenging the church, that's destabilizing thing, and there's some incorrect things coming in from the outside, we're going to have to address those things. And it's not personal or anything. It's just there can be some ideas sometimes that come out and they need to be brought to leadership's attention. And if it's counter to the first principles of Christ, then those need to be addressed and will be spoken about. And it might be an entire network discussion that happens on a Sunday morning or through disseminated through the simple gatherings. So you can see how communication works in this. But what about the Sunday morning network meetings? And how about during the week? What's the purpose of these things now? What's Sunday morning going to be about? Well, it's not a worship or church service, but it's a learning time together as a network of churches. It's about an hour and a half in time at the most. It's a time for dealing with issues all across the churches, having a conversation as a network of small gatherings together, giving information or teaching from the networks team that has to do with our work together or issues that we share together. It'll be informal lecture and dialogue. It'll be kind of like our Thursday nights have been. It's a time to teach on key topics, ideas, important issues to the churches, and engage in discussion with church leaders and the church body, the whole church family. Important, but it's not as important as the simple gatherings, whether it's on Saturday night or Sunday afternoon, Sunday nights, not as important as those gatherings. It serves another purpose, mainly in the area of teaching and discipline life development. So we're working through some things. It's very singular in its focus, this Sunday morning network meeting. It will not look, feel like a Sunday morning worship service. It will not be singing, will not be the kinds of things that we would normally experience there. That's all now intended to be happening in the simple gatherings. The Sunday morning is a focus time for teaching and learning together in community. We'll be doing it all together for a while, but in time when we need to teach first principles, the story, life to the nth, identifying SEMA, and we have special teaching for the kids, mainly to our younger kids. We want them to know the stories of the Bible and the story of the Bible together, and so those kinds of things will happen in that environment as well. But for right now, for the foreseeable future, we'll be all together in the auditorium, start at 10 o'clock for this hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half time. Informal, there'll be coffee in the back starting tomorrow. Grab a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, a glass of water, bring your own with it. We're not going to do much with food. That creates an added wrinkle and challenge and cleanup. And so we're not going to do that right away, but we'll see about that in time. But right now, just something to make it feel relaxed, and even eventually we'll hopefully have some more comfortable seating and movable seating that even creates a better environment for that, where you can be gathered around clusters of groups and whatnot as we're having the discussion together. So that's where we're going to be going on these Sunday network meetings. We will be starting tomorrow. I will be introducing this next encyclical, The Gathering. The meeting is the heart of a complex apostolic network. We know what an apostolic network is now from this last study and what I've explained to you earlier. So this is giving me an opportunity to go down into what was actually going on into those weekly gatherings as we do it together ourselves. Some questions I'll leave with you, okay, to be discussing in your simple gatherings this weekend. And I know some are even starting up this tonight here on Saturday night. So these are the questions that you leaders can deliver, and you can all be thinking about. I'll have these posted down in the description of the video as well, so you can see them there along with the link to the Chan video. What have you appreciated about our conversation so far? What excites you about moving forward with these ideas and plans in light of our study of the first churches? What are you looking forward to? What are you excited about? What are you like, oh boy, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that works out. Secondly, many of you have been involved with our church-based training and partnership with BILD over many years. First principles and resources and ideas, Way of Christ and Apostles, the work that we've been doing together in my stewardship in Albania and Kosovo and Ukraine and now Holland and other places like that. And many of you have gone back and forth even to the conference in Iowa. This began with Pastor Kevin Rhodes some 20 years ago, continued with Bill Burns, continued on with me. So we as a church have been focused and been moving in this direction. And the intention is not to change from that direction, but to continue that journey on. Together with us, even though we're moving to Indiana, the work in Patterson continues to progress in this way. So these ideas are taking root and continuing on. And so we're building on that. But how does it make all sense and integrate so many of the things that we've been doing? And thirdly, what are you trusting the Lord for and praying in anticipation of the future of our church or churches or network of simple gatherings? What seems really encouraging? What seems really challenging to you? How will keeping our focus on Jesus and his design for churches make us one-minded or strong? Talk about these things after you have your meal together and in that time of this family discussion over the course of this weekend. So look forward to hearing how God uses this first weekend of meeting this way. See many of you tomorrow at the network learning time at 10 a.m. That will be live streamed on with Zoom and probably on our Facebook page, or I'm sorry, our YouTube channel. So, but you'll probably be able to view it through the Facebook page. We'll get a link to you that you should be able to click on and just watch if you're not able to come or planning to come to the Sunday morning network teaching time. So, and that will not be two-way. I don't think we'll be able to go back and forth in dialogue. You'll just be able to listen in with what we're doing and what we're discussing there in the auditorium itself. So that's where that will happen. So Lord bless you all, and trust that you have a great Saturday, and thanks for your prayers for us. We head to Indiana on Monday for the first of our phases of moving. We've been loading a truck. Thanks to David Fagan for helping us do that last night, and many others who've encouraged and helped us along the way, and will continue. We have mixed emotions. There's the excitement of a new move, but there's the reality now setting in of what we're moving away from. So appreciate your prayers for that, and hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving ahead this week. There will be a Thanksgiving gathering on Wednesday night. Details for that will come out over the week, and hope you have a great week together with your family as we get into the holiday season here. So God bless, and see you all.